Today's episode of The Bottom Line is brought to you by First Bank.
Jim, for years, Rex Sinkfield, the wealthy Missourian, has been, who's very politically active, has been lobbying the Missouri legislature to act more like Kansas. Kansas passed a huge tax cut 5 years ago. They exempted so-called pass-through businesses, which are like limited liability companies and partnerships and sole proprietors. Yeah. They exempted those little guys completely from the personal income tax, and they cut taxes pretty heavily for everybody else. Governor Brownback said this is a shot of adrenaline into the heart of the state's economy. But guess what happened? State's economy went like this.
Worse than Missouri's.
Worse than Missouri's. Oh, Missouri's no paragon of growth, but last year we added 10 times as many jobs as Kansas. And they've lagged. They've lagged the nation in both jobs and GDP growth every year since these taxes.
Well, this was a great test of the theory that if you cut taxes, you will stimulate businesses to grow and hire people, and that this growth of the economy itself will return the tax money. It didn't work.
Didn't work. In fact, blew a big hole in the state's budget. They had to cut, education and a lot of things that were painful. And the fact is, those services had value to the economy. So the legislature just this spring finally overrode Brownback's veto and mostly reverse those tax cuts.
And it's amazing. It's a Republican legislature. Here's a Republican legislature voting to raise taxes and not overriding the veto of Republican.
Right, but in the last election, some of the most fervent tax cutters, lost in the primaries to more moderate Republicans. So there was,
So people in Kansas noticed the pain in their schools.
Exactly.
They noticed perhaps the potholes in the streets, and they said,
all of those things that government actually adds some value. It's not, it's taxes aren't just money being sucked out of the economy. They actually go to provide goods and services that people value.
Now, after Kansas acted, Missouri imposed kind of Kansas light.
We did.
We started to reduce, or we planned to reduce, the state income tax just by a little notch. We gave the partnerships, the law firms, the sole proprietor companies, basically 25% off their income tax. But very smartly, they said this would only take effect when the state's revenue rose by, was it 100 million?
I believe so. There was a certain revenue threshold, and which was a smart move. But then the next year they passed a separate tax cut for businesses, which apparently nobody thought was really much of a tax cut, and then that blew a big hole in the state's budget. So we've now had Governor Nixon and now Governor Greitens having to find places to cut spending. We're cutting education and other critical services.
The estimate on this tax cut was that it would cut revenues by 15 million. Yeah. The actual figure was 155 million. 10 they had no idea, obviously, what they were doing.
Exactly. Yeah, which is certainly a governance problem, but now it gives us a revenue problem. And the Kansas Light tax cut, as you call it, is still on the books. We haven't reversed it as Kansas has, so it could still bite in sometime in the future.
Can the lesson here be that the way to grow an economy is to fund your educational system, to fund transportation, perhaps even to fund social services and public safety, and that provides.
Sure. It's all it's all part of the equation. I mean, you don't want taxes to be too high, certainly, but there is an optimal level, and Kansas went way below it.
First Bank Wisdom. You don't have to be around for a century to know what counts, but it helps. Let's look ahead.